Welcome to the Cyber Rants podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Rants podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. And today we have a special guest, Tony Robbins, who's talking about something that's absolutely critical for organizations to have. But before we dive into that, Mike, why don't you kick us off with the news?
All right, so here's the news for the 17th of December, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. A cryptocurrency company loses estimated $77 million in cyber attack. One of the world's largest cryptocurrency companies, Ascendix, was hit by a cyber attack that resulted in an estimated $77 million that was stored in the company's hot wallets. The company has promised to reimburse hot wallet owners for virtual currency stolen from their accounts. This isn't good, but this is also the second large-scale attack of cryptocurrency exchange company. On December 5th, 2021, a different company experienced a theft of $196 million in crypto exchange tokens. So if you're big into crypto, be careful.
Yeah, I was going to just to add to that, use a hardware wallet, leveraging the currency exchanges software e-wallet that they'll provide you on the site, super risky. And this is exactly what will happen if they make a mistake on the back end. You'll lose all your stuff.
I'm sure you've all heard about the Apache issues, but this is critical. The U.S. CISA added 13 new vulnerabilities to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, including Apache Log4 Shell, Log4j, and Fortinet FortiOS issues. The CVE 2021-44228 flaw made the headlines last week after Chinese security researcher P0RZ9 publicly disclosed a proof of concept exploit for the critical remote code execution zero-day vulnerability, aka Log4 Shell, that affects Apache Log4j Java-based logging library. The impact of this issue is devastating. Thousands of organizations worldwide are potentially exposed to attacks, and security experts are already reported exploitation attempts in the wild. CISA also warns of a recent disclosed arbitrary file download vulnerability in FortiOS, tracked to CVE 2021-44168. This is actively exploited. One of the researchers said Log4 Shell will continue to haunt us for years to come. So that's, good news. Merry Christmas. Dealing with Log4 Shell will be a marathon treated as such. There are a bunch of additional headlines that I have posted. I just not talking about all of them during the news section. So definitely check out the podcast site for there's a lot of information. And one of them is that this is a state actor, obviously, that probably the Chinese are behind this. Western Digital SanDisk secure access flaws allow brute force attacks and dictionary attacks. The SanDisk secure access software, now rebranded as SanDisk Private Access, allows storing and protecting critical and sensitive files on SanDisk USB file drives. The access to the user's private vault is protected by a personal password, and all these files are automatically encrypted. According to the vendor, secure access version 3.2 was using a one-way crypto hash with a predictable salt. This means the software is vulnerable to dictionary attacks. So be careful with that. Check it out. If you're using that, see if you can get an upgrade and get it fixed. This is an exciting thing. Google fixed the 17th zero-day in Chrome since the start of the year. Google released security updates to address 5 vulnerabilities in the Chrome web browser, including a high-severity zero-day flaw tracked to CVE 2021-4102, which is being exploited in the wild. The CVE 2021-4102 flaw is a use after free issue in the V8 JavaScript and WebAssembly engine. I recommend you update that as quickly as possible. The next 3 are about our favorite topic. Well, my favorite topic, not Lauro's, Microsoft. Hackers steal Microsoft Exchange credentials using IIS module. Threat actors are installing malicious IIS web server module known as OWOWA. That's OWOWA on Microsoft Exchange Outlook web access servers to steal credentials and execute commands on the server remotely. IIS modules are not a common format for backdoors, especially when compared to typical web application threats like web shells, and therefore can be easily missed during standard file monitoring efforts. So right now, this is happening big in Southeast Asia, but we're also seeing signs in Europe, and by now, I'm sure, like Omicron, it's in the US. Microsoft issues a Windows update to patch zero-day used to spread Emotet malware. Microsoft has rolled out Patch Tuesday updates to address multiple security vulnerabilities in Windows, big surprise, and other software, including one actively exploited flaw that's being used to deliver Emotet, TrickBot, or BazaLoader malware payloads. The most critical of the lot is CVE 2021-43890. So patch. And what will they think of next? Files? New fileless malware uses Windows registry as storage to evade detection. A new JavaScript-based remote rat propagated by a social engineering campaign has been observed employing sneaky fileless techniques as part of the detection evasion methods to elude discovery and analysis. The rat utilizes novel methods for fileless persistence, on-system activity, and dynamic runtime capabilities like self-updating and recompilation. Represents an evolution in fileless malware techniques as it uses the registry for nearly all temporary and permanent storage and therefore never writes anything to disk, allowing it to operate beneath or around the detection threshold of most security tools.
Yeah, if you wanted to hide something forever and never, like if I wanted to hide someplace that I knew nobody would ever find me, it would be in the Windows registry, HT local machine. Find me.
Yeah, I remember back in the old days when we used to have to hack the registry to make things work. Now we don't go anywhere near it unless we have to.
Yeah, it's administrative privileges to all.
Those are the big headlines. Like I said, we have a bunch of Log4j headlines that we have listed on the podcast website. There's probably 7 or 8 of them. There's additional things that are very, very much concerning. So if you got a patchy, make sure you're patching. Laura, what do you got?
Well, just a couple on to what you were talking about. Really, I think it's still kind of important for us to be talking about the Log4Shell Java-based vulnerability. So if you're one of our clients, you would have gotten my email last week. We did talk about this last Friday on the podcast. You can't say we didn't warn you that Log4j was out. I listed that on exploits. However, ask yourself a simple question. Do you have an application running Java? If the answer is yes, you need to go check it for the Log4Shell exploit. There's a lot of new capabilities, even information disclosure. So a lot of times if you've patched, there's still some information disclosure that can be gleaned just from the severity of this flaw in Java architecture, right? So remember, if you're running Java, check yourself. All right, we got a guest today, so I don't want to talk about the untalkaboutables. We have enough of that.
We're not going to do the evil tag team of WordPress and Microsoft today.
No, and I'm starting to want to add Google to that stupid list too, because it's like they're like in the hot seat to become the next Microsoft. You know what I mean? With the level of crap that's coming out of Chrome these days, you can't even hardly use a browser in good faith.
Exactly. They used to be secure. Now they're turning into Internet Explorer.
ActiveX. Oh, which reminds me, there was a throwback hack that was posted to the exploit DB today that I want to give a cool old school shout out. It was for ActiveX authentication bypass that worked in the old Internet Explorer. Pretty funny to see something like that posting out there today. It wouldn't shock me considering we just heard somebody who's still running Windows 2000, right, Mike?
Exactly. Yeah. If you run Windows 2000, you get what you deserve.
Well, I have some unfortunate news for our listeners. This is our last episode of the year of 2021.
No.
But the good news is we're going to start again in January.
Oh,
So don't worry, but you're going to miss us for 2 weeks. But that's all right. We're going to come back better, stronger. Reality is we have holidays and lots of business stuff too. We have a business for those people that don't know. But yeah, so we're a lot of year-end stuff. Holidays, we're taking a break for 2 weeks and then coming back with new topics, new adventures on the Cyber Rants podcast in 2022. And it's going to be a good year. I can feel it. For today, though, we're wrapping up the year with a special guest, and we're going to talk about something that is very much needed and very critical for organizations to have. Believe it or not, some still don't. And that is cyber insurance. And we're going to learn everything we never thought we needed to know about cyber insurance so that we can equip ourselves, equip our listeners with the power to make better decisions, make sure they have a good representation of the insurance side to get them the right policies. So if and when something happens, they are covered. So we're going to dive into that. We will take a quick break and be right back.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
And we're back. So we have special guest today, Tony Robbins, joining us. He's an expert in cyber insurance and involved in that field, and is going to share some insight with us. So, Tony, I want to thank you, first of all, for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. And would you mind kicking us off with kind of your journey in the insurance world, and just kind of a brief overview of how you got into cyber insurance? Why is it so important?
Well, I'm an insurance broker. I've been in this business for about 11 years now. Up until a few years ago, cybersecurity wasn't even on my radar. I was primarily, and I'm still primarily a life insurance agent. That's my bread and butter. But about a year and a half ago, I started seeing the trends, people being hit, the ransomware. Started hearing a lot of chatter from clients and potential clients about, not knowing where to turn, not knowing what to do in case something like that was to hit them, not being aware in a lot of ways of how devastating a cyber attack could be. Started doing some research, found some solid companies to represent. And I'm still in the learning phase. There's so much. This is a very vast and deep area of business. So I'm learning something new every day. But understanding, how companies can, really be devastated by this, especially the mom and pop places. They really don't have any idea because they're just not, in that loop, so to speak, to understand how devastating something like this could be to their business and their employees. So I took it upon myself to try to learn as much as I can so far about this business, and to provide a service for them to make sure that they are in a situation where they're not, losing everything to a malicious attack.
And you work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses out there, and I think you're exactly right. They're not in the loop. They don't really understand what is truly at risk. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind almost. So the insurance is a great way. Granted, preventative, or it's not a preventative measure, right? By the time you have to use insurance, you're in an unfortunate situation, but it's so critical to have that. Is there a certain sector that you see that's underserved, or a certain sector of business that you see is just really maybe underinsured and underprotected?
It's across the board. There's not one area of business that is not vulnerable to an attack. And I tell you, something as simple as restaurants and bars, they really have no idea, how they could be, because they do a lot of cash transactions. They don't think that people are sitting there having a good time, are tracking how their business is run. And they don't understand how easily they could be, hit. But again, it's across the board. Every business is vulnerable. I don't care if you're, you have a dog sitting service, or upcoming, multi-million dollar company. If you don't have something in place to mitigate the risks that an attack could, wrought on your business, then, you're a sitting duck. So I tell everybody I meet that no matter what business you're in, you too are vulnerable. So,
yeah,
if you put it this way, if you have a computer, if you use the computer or a smartphone, you're vulnerable, and that's pretty much everybody.
Absolutely. Big. It's an unfortunate problem, but I think one that's here to stay. And so it's important. I think cyber insurance is just a fact of doing business, just like in your general liability policies or anything else.
Exactly.
It's something that's required. It blows me away, because we ask companies when we're doing our scoping discussions and putting together plans and statements of work and such, we ask, do you have cyber insurance? And every once in a while, a lot do, but every once in a while we hear, no, we don't have that. And that's that's a real problem. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We may get into that when it comes to incident response and such. But for now, let's talk about for those people out there that maybe they have insurance, but maybe they don't really understand it, or are worried about being underinsured. Are there key differences that you look for in policies, and kind of key points that you need to make sure are included for adequate protection?
Yeah, the thing I run into a lot, excuse me, is that most people say, "Well, I have an addendum to my general business plan, my commercial policy." Well, a lot of times those addendums do not cover ransomware. Does your policy have a plan in place to help find out where the breach occurred? Does your plan have a policy in place to keep your business up and running after the breach? Does your plan have a policy in place to make your customers who may be violated by that breach whole? So there's a number of different factors that you need to look at when choosing a policy. But again, there's so many different ways to be attacked. You have to make sure that the company you're dealing with is upgrading their knowledge of that realm to make sure that they're staying on top of every way that you can be victimized. And unfortunately, a lot of the larger insurance companies who add policies, add an addendum to their general business or commercial policy, they're just not up on things like that. So
that's a great point. It seems to me, with my limited knowledge of cyber insurance, but it seems to me like I hear a lot about exclusions and things that the policies won't cover, that people aren't anticipating. So that's good to know that ransomware is a big one of those exclusions. Are there struggles with are you seeing in the small, mid-sized business market struggles with getting policies issued just because there's a lack of fundamentals? I mean, are the insurers getting more strict on who they issue policies or how they provide coverage?
I will say that pretty much any business out there that is finding themselves in a vulnerable position is eligible. There's no companies that, I haven't run across with the companies I represent where they're turning down anyone simply because of the nature of their business. They may not have enough income coming in, or they're not big enough, or they're not in the right area that makes them feel comfortable. Now, that may be the case with some of your larger insurance companies. And I'm hoping I'm covering your question adequately, but some of your larger insurance companies may have stipulations where they won't cover this business or that business. But I pretty much work with standalone cybersecurity companies, and they have a broader base of businesses that they'll work with.
Tony, do they ask are there any kind of due diligence questions or any audit of the client prior to issuing a policy so that they can help with underwriting? Or is it just basically, hey, I've got a business, this is what I've got, and then we're going to write a policy for it? Or do the insurance companies that you represent actually ask questions?
Yeah, they'll ask a few here and there, but pretty much for the most part, we do a summary check of your income. We check to see how many employees you have, because obviously that, we want to make sure that, that adds to the risk. The more people who are in your system, the more, gateways to an exposure happening. So yeah, there are a few questions here, but, nothing over the top. We pretty much, for the two companies I represent, we pretty much cover just about anybody. There's no real huge exclusions that would preclude just about any business. And again, I say just about because I haven't run across any business that we couldn't cover. So, it's just like, you go to, get an insurance. Now, I will add to that, if you have had claims before, that will, on your current policy or previous policy, that will add to some scrutiny and may preclude you from getting coverage. But again, this coverage is still so new. I have not run across many companies, if any, if I can remember, that have been turned down because of prior loss claims.
That's good to know, I think, because especially in this for small to medium-sized businesses, that this is that good policies are accessible. I think, larger enterprise, I think they're under more scrutiny and big questionnaires and all that for big policies. But it's nice that the industry has made it accessible for the businesses that really, really need it, that just don't have a clue in a lot of cases of the all the various risk factors out there. So, are there certain policies that you're seeing that you would recommend clients over others out there on the market? In other words, I'm sure they're not all created equal, right? There are probably some that are a lot better than others for small, mid-sized businesses. Would you be able to share those? I know you probably can't share the names of the companies for regulatory issues, but are there traits that you look for in a policy that a small business or medium-sized business should have?
Yeah, you definitely want to have deal with a company who has a plan in place to walk you through the process of getting yourself back whole. And unfortunately, like I said, a lot of your larger policies, a lot of your addendums or endorsements to a general policy do not do that. And that's why I'm a big proponent of standalone policies. These policies have a whole process set up to walk you through the initial claims process, to do the research necessary to find out where the hole is or multiple holes are, and then to even down to your third-party vendors who may have done something on their part to allow this transgression to take place. So again, not that I'm bashing addendums or endorsements to other companies, but I just truly believe that if you're going to go this route, you need to go with a standalone company that has a whole process that, and it can show you that on paper of how they would walk you through the whole, I got this happened, X amount of dollars were taken, my system has been locked up, I can't access my system, as a brick right now, I'm losing business. There are so many different ways that a small to medium-sized company can be devastated, and you want to make sure that the company, your insurance, cyber insurance company, has a way to deal with all of that. One of the companies I represent, and they're my primary company, simply because they offer so much to the client. If you're small to medium-sized, you can't afford an IT department. You can't afford to in your budget to have a winning team like you guys on hand to make sure their vulnerabilities are taken care of. This particular company can offer that at a little bit more of a price point, than a little bit higher of a price point without breaking the bank. I have another one over here that's a little bit more cost effective for a smaller company with smaller revenue, but that does not mean that their services are any less as dynamic as the other company, so you want to make sure that everything is in place. You want to walk through that policy to make sure that every aspect of your needs are met in case of a breach, because you really have no idea of the amount of damage a ransomware or somebody bricking your system can cause you. You can't get invoices in, you have no money coming in, you can't conduct business, employees can't do this, you have data information that's missing. So it goes on, well, you guys know it goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah, we've certainly done some forensic investigations for ransomware attacks, and even assisted in mitigation. It's quite a nightmare. And you're right, Tony. A lot of smaller businesses, they don't consider that your data gets locked up and your system's now locked up. Where did you put that password to log into your bank app so you can pay your employees, or your Square or anything else, right? You have to remember that if you've got one-time PIN codes all on the same computer or all on the same device, and your device gets locked, how are you going to get those one-time codes back? Did you print out backup codes, right? So there's a lot of things that these small organizations aren't considering for worst case scenario. And you're right. It's the most important thing is who's, you can't call Geek Squad, right? Not bashing those guys, but they're just, and Uncle Chico's not going to come He may know computers, but he's not going to come walk you back from a ransomware attack, right? I mean, it's not going to happen. You know, your sister's grandson or whatever the case may be, it's going to be devastating, and you're going to be rebuilding from scratch unless you have a professional team to be able to help you walk back to do the forensic discovery on what happened, help you fix that from happening again, and then also hopefully help you rebuild your systems.
Exactly.
Negotiate ransoms, that whole bit, right? And that's part of those insurance policies, right, Tony, where they'll come in and they'll negotiate ransoms, or they'll help with that, and as well as do the forensic analysis and help you rebuild and get back to, you know, some form of a normal operating environment.
Exactly. The part you just mentioned about the negotiation. I mean, they have no. I mean, these threat actors, the same way a burglar will watch from the street how you and your family move in order to figure out how to hit you, these threat actors do the same thing to businesses. And they don't understand that yet the negotiation process of getting this taken care of so you can get your information back and get your company up and going, they just don't get how devastating this can be. And the total cost of a business interruption is just, there's so many things, and trying to convey that to a business owner, a guy who's been in business 30, 40 years, long before things like this took place, it's an uphill battle until you have to have the data to show them, so.
Yeah, threat actors are clever too, right? They'll encrypt your data, but they'll use a separate key for every file. So even if you pay them, you're left trying to figure out what key goes to what file, and you've got 10 million files.
Exactly.
I think that the last stat I saw was it costs 5 times as much to restore business as to prevent a hack, and
Wow.
that can be devastating. So
yeah,
I believe it, and I've been looking at some of the financial data we have from various clients and such that where we translate cyber risk into financial metrics. Some of those have been upwards of 10 times what they would pay on services. So it's pretty outrageous. And one of the things too, we always advise people on is that you have to have cyber insurance placed for that, for the resources in the event of a breach. Right, like what you just mentioned, Tony. I like that description, that illustration of them walking you through the process, start to finish, and what happens if, then being able to answer to those different scenarios. I think that's critically important because, for one, and I think Laura mentioned the forensics and incident response. Well, your cyber insurer is going to have pre-approved vendors for that type of thing, right? So you don't have to go out looking for it. They're going to have people that they cover that they already have relationships with, and I think that's a critical asset to have. So I like that description, Tony, of basically making sure that they're showing you the ins and outs of what happens in various scenarios, rather than just saying, "Here's your policy, good luck." And
exactly.
So I think that's critical. How much does, and you mentioned a couple different providers and such. I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of different stuff in the insurance world, but how much does price correlate to quality? Is it more about really going out and seeking the right provider, or is it as simple as the more you pay, the better your coverage?
Well, that last part you just said is true to a degree. I mean, if you get the basic package, obviously you're going to get basic services. But the more you do pay within that realm, yes, it covers more items. Now, as far as companies are concerned, you can have a very high-end, well-established company who may charge you a lot more, but do they actually provide the services in order to make sure that everything is in place in case of a breach? Again, if this company is doing more than just cybersecurity, that's highly unlikely. And again, I'm not bashing the big companies that who have over the last few years added this for their customers. I'm just an advocate of the standalone companies who are built to do nothing but this. And the pricing there is very competitive. With those companies, you're not going to have to spend a whole lot more in order to get adequate service. You can, if you're a small to medium-sized company and do not have a lot of a big budget for adding something like this to your bottom line, is not going to break the bank, and you'll still get the peace of mind to know that if a breach takes place, things will be taken care of, and you can still afford to pay your employees. You can still afford to service your clientele. So yes, price is not exclusive to the larger companies who can afford it.
Do the policies cover loss of income, loss of revenue, or is it, you're kind of on your own for that?
No, loss of income is covered. You will have a plan in place in order to make sure that your business is able to get its bills paid, keep the lights on. There is a component to that. Just like, if you were to get into a car accident and you need your medical bills need to be paid, there are certain aspects of that policy that are more broader than others. Again, you're going from basic to intermediate to the more elaborate parts of the policy, depending on where you're able to pay. But for the most part, all of our policies, all the companies I represent in all their policies do have a plan in place to keep your lights on, keep everything going, and to make sure your employees get paid, and to help keep you afloat.
So I have a question for you, Tony, and I think
Yes.
Mike kind of started talking kind of toward this earlier. Is it safe to assume that cyber insurance companies in the future will begin to maybe up their standards for taking or for writing policies based on the preconditions of the organization? As an example, right, getting health insurance with predefined conditions is tough, right? And they're asking you, right, do you smoke, do you do this, or whatever the case may be. It seems that because ransomware and cyber attacks are not going down, right, everything is increasing, and with everybody kind of just wielding technology at a whim, we can safely assume it's going to continue to increase. So do you feel that the insurance companies will maybe start requiring you to have certain things in place, like maybe asking companies for a security questionnaire that kind of covers what base IT security they have today? Like, if they've removed administrative privileges from everybody that's working there, all the employee workstations, do they have some form of antivirus working? Have they aligned to some form of security framework? Do you and so I guess, do you feel like they'll kind of move that way to try to cover the risk that they're greatly assuming by like blanketly just covering somebody in a policy that's probably going to mess up?
You know what? It's inevitable. Now, the companies I represent, they do have plans in place. The one company, which is a much larger company, they will do an assessment of your business. They will give you recommendations to implement, but if you do not implement them at this time, they will still cover you. Now, as you mentioned before, as these attacks increase, you're going to have situations to where these insurance companies are going to have to, keep their costs down. You're going to have to implement certain things, just like if you drive a car. If you have had prior DUIs, you may have to pay more. If you had prior accidents, you're going to have to pay more. If you are not adhering to basic protocols in order to protect yourself, then, and if it's an ongoing problem, then you may get dropped. Is this going on now with my particular companies? No. They are, as you said, they are allowing just about anybody to get a policy. But in the future, as we go more and more in line, it's inevitable that will happen. It just makes sense,
Yeah, it's like I can teach one squirrel to drive the car, but that doesn't mean we should just blanketly insure all squirrels to drive.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's impressive. If you can teach a squirrel to drive, I'm impressed. I mean, I've seen them on the water skis,
little bicycles. They have water skis, squirrels. I mean, get on YouTube for once in your life. I'm just kidding.
Squirrels are very, very talented creatures. Well, thank you so much, Tony. I think that's great advice. Looking for a lot of great things, but really looking for those companies that are specialists in cybersecurity. That's outstanding, and not something I would have necessarily thought of. I would have thought of just going to the major insurer that kind of does everything. But I think there's a lot to be said for specialization, especially in the world of cybersecurity. And there's a lot of knowledge to be had. So it's great to hear that these companies are upping their game when it comes to the actual support, as well as the coverage in terms of dollars. So that's outstanding. Any final words of wisdom, Tony, or anybody for that matter? Any pitfalls people need to be concerned about, or anything you'd leave the listeners with?
Well, first I want to say, thank you guys for having me on here. We like to think of ourselves in the cyber insurance business as, in partnership with guys who do what you do. We want to make sure that our clients understand that, working with us is great, but the same way you have, a great mechanic, or for your car, you have a great contractor for your home. You have insurance for your home, but you also have professionals on hand to help make sure things are, in good working order, and you're covered, and everything you and your family are safe. And that's how we view what you guys do. So we just want to make sure our clients and potential customers understand that this is we're going into a world where this will be necessary. And it's necessary now, but it will be even more necessary in the future. And if you're not prepared for what is going to come, then you're doing yourself, your family, and your business, people who rely on you, a serious disservice. You got to have this in place. If not, then what are you doing?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I just add to that and say that check your cyber insurance policies, make sure that it's not something that was added on, and that it covers what you really need in the case of something happening.
Yes, great point. You have to be. If you're not prepared if your insurance policy is not prepared for every aspect of what could possibly can happen, then you need to do some shopping around.
Well, you also need to look at your incident response policy and make sure that your incident response policy does not in some way void what your insurance policy will cover. If forensics are required for a laptop that gets exploited, and you turn that laptop off and wipe it before the insurance company gets to it, that causes a problem. So you make sure you actually read your policy and see what's required, and then
exactly
incident response documents around that and your process around that.
And that's the core of everything. The response, what your company is willing to do to get you whole, that's the core of it. So if there's no proper response policy there, then you need to start shopping.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tony. I know you're licensed in a handful of states: Arizona, Ohio, Florida, and some others. If people are looking to learn more, or maybe take a look at their current coverage, or purchase coverage for the first time, how should they get a hold of you?
Well, you can reach me either by phone 480-516-2234, or you can reach me by email at robbinsinsurancegrp. Group is spelled GRP @gmail.com. Robbins, ROBBINS, Insurance Group, GRP @gmail.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tony. It's a pleasure to have you, and it's a critical topic. So those people that aren't 100% sure of their coverage, I hope you go out there and check it out, get that done, and get a new policy if you need to, or upgrade what you have. Make sure you're working with an expert and somebody who really knows what they're doing in this space. So thank you, everyone, for listening. The articles and Tony's information will be on the podcast website, cyberrantspodcast.com. And be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcast platform, whichever one that may be. Rate the podcast and reach out to us if you have any requests for topics in the future, anything like that. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we will see you again in January.
Have a good time, people. Be careful out there.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.